Well, officially, welcome to this event, Inspiring Wonder, the possibilities of a Catholic education in truth, beauty, and goodness, and in particular, the possibilities of actually starting a new truth, beauty, and goodness school, I'm going to call it, the Stella Maris Academy at Star of the Sea. My name is Maggie Gallagher. I am the executive director of the Benedict XVI Institute for Sacred Music and Divine Worship, and I've also served in the advisory board of the Stella Maris Academy. And just to tell you briefly, the Benedict XVI Institute's mission, we were founded by Archbishop Cordileone, and our mission is opening the door of beauty to God. So we're very interested, I'm interested personally in learning more about the experts that we have here and in sharing the excitement of the journey as well. And in learning from you, the audience who came here, about what your concerns are, your goals are, your dreams are for your education, for your kids. Benedict XVI Institute pursues this great mission of opening the door of beauty to God through two great strategies, providing practical resources for more beautiful and reverent liturgy and energizing a Catholic culture of the arts. And if you want to learn more about us, benedictinstitute.org, but we are not the focus tonight. The way this is going to work, I'd just like to lay out the agenda. I actually want to start, I just got an email that we have the new Stella Maris Academy video. It's the short video that will go on the website and explain the dream and the vision of the school. And I'd like to start unconventionally, maybe with just sharing that video. Actually, we're going to start with Father Ilo leading us in prayer, after which he will probably not be able to stay. But we're really, really grateful that the pastor of Star of the Sea is here to lead us off in prayer. And then after looking at the video, we will introduce our two celebrity guest panelists and hear from them both. And then we'll have a chance to have a wider conversation with them. And we'll finish with Gavin Colvert. I don't know what your title is, Gavin. Headmaster, the guy. What?
Head of school.
Head of school of the refounded Stella Maris Academy, reimagined, let's call it Stella Maris Academy. And he's going to walk us through in somewhat more detail what this school is going to be and what it's going to offer parents. Then we'll have a chance again for parents to step in, or non-parents, just people interested in Catholic education, to make comments. And we will try to end very tightly around at 8:30 Pacific. But I stay on for another half an hour. We always end our events with a social half hour. It's optional for everyone, but if you just like to meet each other and get a chance to converse a little, and we like to do it that way. So enough of Maggie. Father Ilo, will you lead us in prayer, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Maggie. My name is Father Joseph Ilo, the pastor of the parish, Star of the Sea Parish in San Francisco, as well as of the school. It's not a halo behind me, but it's actually the rose window of Star of the Sea Parish in San Francisco. Thought it would be nice to show some of the beauty of our parish church, which would be a large part of the school itself. I want to thank Maggie and the B16 Institute for your interest in our endeavor and all the work you put into that. Also, Rosemary Vanderweel is an old friend. She gave us a conference 2 years ago now, I think, to our school faculty at the time, training us in classical education model. And Michael Ortner also came and spoke to our school about 2 years ago. And I thank you, Michael and Rosemary, for giving your time. And of course, Gavin, our head of school. Let us begin with a prayer in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Almighty and eternal God, creator and sustainer of all that is, we beseech your Holy Spirit to illuminate our minds and hearts tonight. Pour into us the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and of strength, the spirit of knowledge and of fear of the Lord. Let our delight be the fear of the Lord. We ask this blessing through the selfsame Christ, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you, Father, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father. Gavin, you want to show us the latest, and we'd love to get your reactions to this, this video.
All right, let me fire that up here for just a moment. This is our, we want to thank Joshua Cavalier, who is the videographer who produced this for us. And he's just sent us the latest cut, so we wanted to share it with you. Let me just make sure that I have optimized my screen to share. Okay, here we go.
Remind him, O Sacred Heart of Jesus, of your infinite love.
Our daughter was happy with school. It was training her mind. It was a fine experience, but it didn't train her in character from a biblical standpoint.
What I want to prepare them for is a life seated in dignity and in truth.
How God is infused in everything.
Both in the classroom and the community setting.
As you look at the earth and science, creating the curiosity to say, why is that design perfect?
Teaching kids where they're at and that transition from, now you have all this information. How do you think about the information that you've been given?
Children today know a lot of things, but I'm not sure how well they can put those things at the service of a flourishing life, to integrate what we know now with the wisdom of the ages.
One of the things that people often ask me is, what's different about a school like Stella Maris? You'll find a rigorous academic program, a safe, warm, welcoming environment for children where kids enjoy being a part of a school family. We will have a formal focus upon classical languages and cultures, specifically Latin, the importance of music, but it's not just the subjects that students will study that will be different. When children are young, they need a great deal of scaffolding and support from their teacher. So what you'll see in an early childhood classroom is a teacher helping children to make connections with the different subjects that they're studying. How does what they're observing in a science class fit together with what they're learning in mathematics, or very naturally in a literature class come across questions of a moral nature, and truly human questions cut across the various subjects or disciplines we study in school. This is why we say that theology is an integrating principle of our curriculum, and that faith is what animates our joy of learning.
What a wonderful opportunity to have God infused in his daily education through their learning of science and, math and humanities.
I hope to ground them in the wisdom that they need as they meet the challenges of their day.
I think engendering a love of learning through an integrated education is an accelerator to that.
And ultimately, when kids graduate from Stella Maris Academy, that's what they will be able to do, be able to integrate the disciplines themselves, so that when they go to high school and college and career life, they're able to take what they've learned here and use it productively.
Our son, the school children, and the parents can feel empowered by knowing that there is a community of like-minded, of similar faith.
I feel like we're on the same page and that we value the same things.
If you value classical integrated education, not only for your own children, but for yourselves, you have a home with us.
Come join us and learn more about how we form young minds and hearts for the journey of life through authentic Catholic liberal education.
I will be enrolling John in Stella Maris Academy for fall of 2021.
We welcome you to Stella Maris Academy and look forward to working with you in building the kingdom of God within our own families.
Well, wow.
There you go.
Thank you very much. That is extremely well done, I think. And I see some comments in the chat box that echo that. If anyone has any constructive critiques, you don't have to applaud. We appreciate any kind of feedback, honest feedback that you have in the chat box. It'd be very helpful. So we have just a stunning panel, really. Michael Ortner is the chairman of Cana Academy, whose mission is equipping teachers in particular to with the resources they need to teach well in a classical liberal Catholic environment. And he comes out of the world of entrepreneurship. He was the CEO of Capterra Inc. And he is a passionate advocate of the importance of liberal arts in preparing students for success in industry, technology, and science. So let's begin by welcoming Michael Ortner and hearing his story.
Great, thank you very much, Maggie. Could everyone maybe nod your head if you can hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay, terrific. Well, thank you to Gavin and Father Ilo and the team for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today. I'll try to keep my comments brief and touch on a bunch of things, but I would love to save as much time for Q&A at the end as we can. I'm sort of an unconventional speaker for something like this. I'm a 47-year-old homeschool dad of 6. We homeschool our kids through 6th grade, and then we send them to there's a local classical school that runs 7th to 12th grade that we send them to. My path to classical education I've come in to this movement in a few different ways. I actually had my own sort of educational, intellectual awakening in my 20s when I first started discovering Plato and Aristotle and Aquinas. And I got through high school and college without ever having to read any of these great thinkers, or at least very much. And as I delved more into them in my 20s, and then later started having kids, and my wife and I started researching curriculums and what we wanted to do, we came upon classical education. And so for the last 15 years, we've gotten more and more into it. And when I sold my company 5 years ago, that's what I've been spending most of my time doing, has been sort of combination of philanthropy and advising within the world of classical education. And the good news is there is a growing movement in classical education, particularly in Catholic schools across the country, which is great to see because we need a movement like this. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the downturn of Catholic education over the last 50 years, we used to have around 6 million kids in the mid-1960s, about 6 million in Catholic K-12 schools, and we're now down to 1.7 million. So that's a 70% drop in the last 50 years. And there's a number of reasons for that. I won't go into all of that, but I'd say the number one reason is a failure for our Catholic schools to truly differentiate themselves and be authentically Catholic and present a true alternative to what's happening in the public schools. And the beauty of this classical liberal education movement is that it does present and provide a really differentiated product. It's extremely different, the vision and the execution of an education than what's happening everywhere else. Unfortunately, most Catholic schools followed the path of public schools with a little bit of religion in there. And what what's being proposed here is extremely different, and that's why it's very, very exciting, and I support it wholeheartedly. So let me, part of the reason why they invited me to speak was to be able to speak from a perspective. So I started a tech company, and I ran it for 15 years before selling it. And I want to draw from that experience because I know a lot of parents worry about, especially in Silicon Valley, are worried about, hey, there's a good chance we want our kids to go into the tech industry or have successful careers. And there's obviously a huge focus on STEM in the public school system and in other schools. So are we, how much of a disadvantage would our kids be at or whatnot? So I want to speak directly to that. I want to share a story. So about 10 years ago, I was at a talk, and I met the head of school of the well-known classical school in our area here. I'm in Northern Virginia. I met him at a lecture at Georgetown, and I was introduced to him, and I had heard about his school from a number of people leading up to meeting him. And we met, we talked briefly, and said our goodbyes. But then I followed up on the following week, and I said, "Hey, I hear great things about your school. I would love to. We have a summer internship program at my tech company, and we'd be happy to bring on, if you have any kids there who would be interested, I'd be happy to consider them." And so he got back to me and said, "Okay, great. Thanks for the offer, and I'll kind of spread the word around a little bit." And mind you, this is a 7th to 12th grade Christian classical school. Definitely not a STEM school. The kids don't do anything really on computers at all, except for one semester of junior year where they do a programming language called MATLAB that helps them with their physics classes. So he got back to me. About a week later, I heard from two brothers. One of them was 15 years old, and one of them had just turned 18. So they were one was finishing his sophomore year, and one is a senior in high school. And they both reached out to me, and they were two brothers, and they were looking for a summer job. So that summer, one of our managers, his name is Danny, I put him in charge of all of our interns, and it was our largest crop of interns that summer. We had already committed to 6 summer interns. This is the month of April. They were all going to be starting in a month or so. And we already had 6, which was already a record number for us. He did all the recruiting himself. He recruited them from top local colleges. These were all kids that were ages 20 to 22. And it was a stellar group from local top universities, William and Mary, UVA, Georgetown, etc., all getting great grades and all with backgrounds in business and or technology. And so he already had a great class, and he really didn't want to take them on, but it's a luxury of being the founder of the company. I could twist his arm a little bit, and he took on these 2 high school kids. And we're about a few weeks into the summer, and I get a late night email from him, and he asks me, "Mike, where on earth did you find these interns?" And I happened to be on email that night, and I emailed him back, say, "Why? Is everything okay?" And he replied back with, these 2 kids were incredible. They were the best of the interns, even though they were younger and less experienced than everyone else. They were complete all-stars. Everything from the questions they asked to their work ethic, their character, they were a joy to be around. They're smart. They did great work despite no background in any of this. And and I remember at the end of the summer, I put that to the test a little bit. I remember asking the 15-year-old to do a little project for me, and he did it in literally a quarter of the time that I think it would have taken me. He did such a fantastic job with it. So these were 2 great interns for us. And from that point on, for all the rest of the summers that I remained at Capterra, we hired all of our interns from this local classical school. And they did a variety of jobs for us, everything ranging from research to writing blog posts to some marketing. We had a couple of them get on the phone with customers, which was unheard of for interns, but their communication skills were so good. And then we even had one who joined our tech team for the summer, which was pretty remarkable given the fact that we didn't even really hire. We did very little hiring directly out of college. We really only hired. We had a small, lean and mean tech team, a half dozen people or so, and we generally only hired people with experience. But the leader of our tech team had enough confidence in this one person to give him a shot, and he did great. So this is my this is my first experience with hiring as interns, tech interns, from a classical school, and they were incredible. But you could say that's one anecdote, that's one story, or maybe 15 or 20 anecdotes, because it was 15 or 20 interns over a 5-year period. So let's go out and scope from there. More anecdotes. Tech leaders, many tech leaders throughout Silicon Valley, many of you may know them, have humanities degrees. And the vast majority of them did not do a STEM program in grade school or high school. Many of them didn't, and many of them did go on and to study computer science in in college. But very few of them went through STEM programs, K through 8 or high school. A couple other anecdotes that I think are worth sharing related to this are, I meet tech leaders all the time that they're the only people I know who don't let their kids use smartphones until they're 16 years old, or get on social media until they're 16 years old. Most parents that I know are not in the tech industry, and most parents I know let their kids, they buy their kids their smartphone for the first time when the kid is 10, 11, 12 years old. Almost the only ones who I know who don't do that are in the tech industry, because they know how risky it is. They know how distracting they are. So it's generally the tech leaders and tech executives that are the ones that are much more hesitant when it comes to this technology, much more so than the non-tech people, because they know that, again, they know the addictive nature of it. And then the last anecdote that I would share is, not only do they not want their kids using technology in their personal lives, but they don't want them using them in their schools as well, especially when they're in the younger grades, K through 8, or even K through 10. And the best example of this is the huge popularity. If anyone there is familiar with the Waldorf School in Mountain View, it's called Waldorf School of the Peninsula, if anyone's familiar with it. But they pretty much ban technology. And they get tons of executives, parents that are executives at Apple and Google sending their kids there. The parents that know they want to place a lot of restrictions on their kids in technology, because they know how distracting and how addictive it can be. So it sounds counterintuitive. You think that all these parents that are in the tech space would be even more gung-ho for tech. And from my experience, the opposite seems to be true. But again, you could just say, great, maybe this is my network and I'm bringing all my bias into this. So I'll expand out one level further and just go to the research that I've read on this. You can read this research too. If you go to there's an OECD program for international student assessment, and they've tested over 500,000 students from over 70 countries. And what they have found is all technology, and this includes computers, internet access, interactive whiteboards, e-readers, you name it, lower test scores, math test scores, science test scores, reading test scores across the board, with the exception of one technology. The only technology that does not reduce test scores are the projectors that have been around since I was in school. But all of the new technology, while in theory, a lot of it sounds good in the classroom, all the evidence, all the research that has been done shows that it doesn't, and it's counterintuitive. And then when you add on top of that, that across the country, on average, we spend almost $1,000 per student per year on technology, it's extremely frustrating. Imagine if we took that $1,000 and we put half of it towards cutting costs and lowering tuition or reducing tax dollars going to schools, and we save the other half for paying the teachers more money. I mean, I would imagine this would be a fairly popular thing if everyone knew the data and knew these stories behind the data. So in summary, to directly address the point, if you really want to position your child for a STEM career, there are so many amazing resources available online, ranging from AOPS if you're really into math, or Coursera if you want your kid to start learning programming. And it's almost impossible for any school to compete with a lot of these online resources, which at this point are amazing. So there's great extracurricular opportunities for parents to get their kids exposure to this stuff. Our oldest son uses AOPS, Art of Problem Solving. It's an amazing resource for math. There's even our classical school that is highly advanced math. Every kid is doing calculus their junior year and doing multivariable calc and linear algebra their senior year. Not even our school can compete with Art of Problem Solving and what my son is doing in his spare time and enjoying that. So to me, I think relying on your school for a tech career would be as ridiculous as relying on your school, if you want your kid to be a professional soccer player. So I would want my school to focus on the core things that really only my school can do in serving parents. So I would rely on my school for the much more important things, such as helping parents with, number one, fostering their sense of wonder. I really view my public school education that I received, and unfortunately my friends who had your typical Catholic school education back in the 80s as well, theirs was very, very little different than my public school education. I view it as a wonder-killing experience. And I view what the classical liberal education movement doing is very much fostering the sense of wonder is central to it. So that's what I want from my school. I want them to help foster this sense of wonder. I want them to help my students fall in love with all of their subjects, encounter saintly role models. The importance of hiring amazing teachers, virtuous teachers, is huge. And to be able to have those role models for our kids cannot be underestimated. I want them facilitating the reading and discussing of great literature. And there's a lot of good literature that should be read in the K-8 range that sets a child up to read great books in high school and beyond. And that's what I would want from my school. One of my immediate measures for looking at any school is if a school is proud of their reading list, they will publish it on their website. If it's haphazard, they won't. So look at any of the great K-8 schools or high schools, look at their websites. Are they proud of their reading list, and do they proudly display it? It's one of the great barometers of whether or not they're confident in what they're doing. So if we can get that right, if we can get the school helping us with those core things, and we can give our kids the same kind of education that everyone from the Thomas Jeffersons, the Albert Einsteins, the Leonardo da Vinci's received, then I would not be worried about career prospects, whether it's in tech or any other industry. They'll be able to do whatever their heart desires. In fact, they'll be positioned to flourish not only in their career, but in all respects. And as a parent, isn't that what we all want for our kids? So anyway, that's my sort of short version of the case for classical liberal education, regardless of whether you want your kids to be, a future tech entrepreneur, a lawyer, a doctor, you name it. It is helping them setting themselves up for a life of learning and growing in all the virtues, both intellectual and moral virtues. So I'll conclude there, and I'm happy to field any questions once we get more towards the end, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. I want to move on in a second, but you said something very provocative, and I wondered if you have reflected the idea that exposing children to technology when young backfires. What do you think it is? What is it about assuming that the way to educational excellence is more engagement with technology that it leads schools and parents sometimes astray?
So is the question why do I think it's not working, or why are the schools doing it this?
No, the question is, why does it backfire, right? We live in a highly technological society. So why is it that exposing, we almost say, well, you expose kids, it's the main pathway to creativity and innovation. It's the center of commerce. It's the emergence of many of the most admired people. It's all coming from this sector. So why is it that if you want your child to be a great poet, you would expose them to poetry? But if you would like to foster a successful entrepreneur, you don't think technology is the answer particularly?
Yeah. I'm going to give the dead simple, obvious answer that I think a lot of people would resonate with, and it's what I witnessed in the workplace. We, as adults, get distracted by technology. We had a lot of freedom at my tech company. I gave everyone tons of freedom. And what we found is, and overall it worked pretty well, but the distraction that our devices play for everyone, both at work and at home, it's just, we as adults have a hard time resisting it. And it's different, and males and females have very different distractions. For males, they can't resist, whether it's video gaming, or if they're at work, they can't resist going to ESPN.com or all these other things related to sports, or even more nefarious things. Men have a very hard time resisting it. For women, they have a harder time resisting social media and texting. And I think some of it is for men, so many men are task driven at their nature. And for women, they're often more social driven at their nature. And technology, whether it's social media or video gaming or so many other things online, it becomes a huge distraction for adults. Now take that and now apply that to children. Children have no self-control over this stuff. They get so distracted by technology that they get sucked into so many things that it becomes just a huge distraction for them. So they lose the focus. It's the opportunity, because the cost becomes all the time that they're not reading good books or drawing or being creative, because they're sucked into this fake world online where they're constantly being entertained by something. And it's soul sucking for all of us. We're all in danger of it. We're all at least slightly guilty of it. But it's just much, much harder on children. And I think that's the number one. I think there are other reasons, but that's by far and away my number one. It's just too much of a distraction.
Well, thank you for that. And we'll get back to you. I'm just thrilled to introduce Rose Mary Vanderweel, and she is the president of Our Lady of Lourdes Classical Academy in Denver. And the story she has to tell us is so relevant because what she has done, I'm sure with a lot of help, but under her leadership, is to take a failing Catholic school and by creating this inspiring classical education, turned it into a thriving academy. So Rosemary, welcome and tell us what you can tell us.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Gavin, for inviting me. And thank you, Mike, for kicking us off. Everything you said, I usually say a condensed version of whenever parents ask me when I'm touring them. And it's just so good to hear it from you. I heard you speak at a conference a couple of years ago, and it's so encouraging to not be crazy in this field and to say, like, no, there's people who have given, who have started tech companies who feel the way we do, and it's just such a great support. So that saves me from my soapbox of why I think technology, because you hit it all perfectly. I'll just share a little bit about my story and why this discovery of classical education has really changed my life as an educator and now as a parent. But really, I came to classical education as a burnt out Catholic school teacher, and where I was frustrated and finding just this constant dissonance and tension in my life was here I had given my life to Catholic education and wanted so badly to not only form the kids in their faith, but to form them to be deep thinkers and to form them to want to continue to learn for the sake of learning. And sure enough, the various different schools, Catholic schools I taught in my 7 years of teaching prior to taking over at Lourdes, we were following the same utilitarian approach to education, which was you need to know this to advance to the next grade. You need to know this to advance to the next grade. And somehow we brought Christ in and tried to make that come along alive and pass the faith on. But we always fell short. And the statistic that Mike brought up about Catholic schools declining in enrollment, there is a parallel statistic from Pew Research that says, I can't remember the exact number, but it's a crazy high number. 85% of students who graduate from Catholic education don't practice their faith. They leave their faith. They're not just mediocre in their faith. They're actually more aggressive against it. And so that seems to me to be a pretty big trademark of something that needs to be addressed in Catholic education. And as I was a Catholic school teacher years ago, I felt that and I was very discouraged. And so my thought was, I think I'm done with education. I can't find my niche. I can't find a school where I really feel fulfilled as a teacher, where I really feel like what I am giving to the kids is not only history or English, whatever the subject matter was that I was teaching, but really a desire to want to learn and to pursue wisdom for the sake of wisdom. So I was ready to cash in my chips and go work at Starbucks and make more money. And I decided instead of that, I might, through the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and some very prominent people in my life, Bishop Conley being the most, he said, instead of always complaining about what's wrong with Catholic schools, go do something about it. Go fix it. And his conversion came from a classical experience in his own life in education. So I took over at Lourdes, at Our Lady of Lourdes in Denver. It's in the heart of the city. It's surrounded by, there's 5 other Catholic schools in a probably 6 or 7 mile radius. And Lourdes did not have the most money out of this group of Catholic schools. We didn't have anything glamorous. Nothing was attracting people. And the diocese said, this is not sustainable. We're shutting the doors. The priest said, let me have one more chance. Let me change leadership. So he brought me in and I had presented my plan to him of, okay, I want to do this 3-year transition into classical education. I am not classically educated. And I honestly, looking back, I knew so little to what I know now. And I think what I will continue to learn in my life. But all I knew was that what was happening in Catholic schools, we have to change. Catholic schools should not look like a public school with religion. They just shouldn't. They need to look vastly different from a philosophical standpoint. I won't go into all that tonight because if I start talking, I'll never stop. But we really cannot, we have to reclaim what we do best. And Catholic education has been done better for hundreds of years leading up to the Industrial Revolution. So what we need to do is go back and say, when Catholic education is flourishing and doing what it's supposed to be doing, what does it produce? Of course, we want our children to be successful. Of course, we want them to have good jobs. But if that is our end goal, we're falling far short of the mark, especially when it comes to the church and what she asks of us in our mission as Catholic schools. But more just in forming humanity. If we're simply forming students to know that they're going to have a 40-hour-a-week job, and once they have to work through college and get the career that they want, they're going to make money. That's the goal in life, is to make money. And then when you're 65, after working your head off and hopefully having some perks in life, but really you will find happiness when you're 65. That's kind of the track we put people on. And I experienced that firsthand when a student asked me, why do I have to learn this? Why do I have to know anything about the Revolutionary War? And without even thinking, my answer was, so you can go to high school. And the moment I said that, I was like, no, I am failing as a teacher. That is not why we teach history. And we have to recover that. So in my own frustration and in my own kind of wrestling with my unhappiness as a Catholic school teacher, I discovered classical education and put it into practice at Our Lady of Lourdes. What we have seen, well, okay, so that was in 2011, which is hard to believe that we're 10 years now into this project. I was given 3 years to turn the school around and to increase the enrollment, make the budget sustainable, all these things that many Catholic schools have to deal with, unfortunately, all too often. What I did was I did not focus on the curriculum right away at all. I focused on restoring the reason behind education, and by getting the teachers on board to understand their purpose. The very most basic premise of a Catholic school is to support parents as the primary educators. And we have got to understand that role and support parents properly. I don't want helicopter parents. I don't want parents who come in and criticize everything I do, but I also don't want parents who are so hands-off and say, you raise my kid, you teach him how to think, you teach him how to go to mass. We really need to recover and bring back the importance of parents as the primary educators. So that was my first goal, was to say, what we need to do is read the church documents and do what they say. And the first thing they say is parents are the primary educators. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean that every parent is called to homeschooling. In fact, many parents are not called to homeschooling and do it out of necessity or do it because they don't feel like they have options. What it means is the program that my school is offering must support the mission of the family. And I think every single parent I talk to, every single family I interview, I say, what is your end goal for your child? The majority of them, maybe they say a good job, but when I drill down a little and talk with them, no, the end goal that parents want for their children is for their child to, first of all, become a saint. Second of all, to be a good human, to be formed well in their humanity. And in doing that, of course, they're going to get a good job. So we have to just reprioritize. And that's what we did at Lourdes. We reclaimed the formation of what education is. As Mike talked about, if you just focus on forming, skill-oriented people, you're missing out on the human element of what we're doing. And this is so desperately what our culture needs right now. When you talk about why kids shouldn't have technology, it's because they're losing the ability to communicate with one another, to look one another in the eye, to have conversations where they listen and ask questions back. And all of that may seem, not as important as it is to have a good job or to be skilled in technology, but those are critical formative parts of our humanity. And when they are not taught, they are not learned. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, if you go to your average public high school, see how many students look you in the eye, see how many are even smiling. I mean, it's incredible to me to see the loss of humanity that education continues to perpetrate. So what a classical education is doing, and what we're trying to do at Our Lady of Lourdes, and what Gavin is trying to do, is bring back the education that forms humanity to function as leaders, as critical thinkers, and as young men and women who are equipped to defend their faith. That's the most important. I kind of did that in backwards order. We can't do that if we're running lockstep with public education. We cannot do that if we're trying to compete with the newest educational trends that come out every 5 minutes. We have to say, no, we're the Catholic Church. We started education. Jesus was the master teacher. We know how to do this much better, and we have to reclaim that confidence. That's what a classical school is going back and saying, here's how we prepare the best humans to be great doctors, to be great lawyers, to be great, grocery store clerks. That doesn't define your happiness. Your happiness is defined by your relationship with God, not your paycheck. And then the other thing I think that is worth pointing out, another kind of aspect that we're very focused on at Our Lady of Lourdes, is you hear the tagline, we're teaching critical thinking, we're teaching critical thinking. Yes, we absolutely need to teach critical thinking. The skills to think well, to reason well, and to articulate well are being lost. And unfortunately, I've read some of the programs that say we teach critical thinking. They might bring in a couple logic puzzles and, try to get kids to problem solve, but they're missing the bigger picture of, you can't critically think about something if you don't understand the content. And so I've always cautioned people to say, like, yes, we want to teach our kids how to think. That's a good and noble goal. But that doesn't disregard the content of what we're teaching. And so a classical education gives the kids this rich tradition and the rich content to say, yeah, we're going to teach you how to think and how to reason and how to argue and how to defend well, but we're going to do it with this beautiful content that goes much deeper than, the Houghton Mifflin textbook that your child currently has. So there's a depth to the curriculum, there's a depth to the information that's being given, but there's also a focus on how the children respond and how we are teaching them to, like Mike said, want to continue to wonder. Now, I said all of that without giving any practical day-to-day things. I think Gavin's going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm happy to answer more of the practical questions. But I think from kind of the 30,000 foot level, what is most important as you're considering education for your children is, even just as we look at the state of our culture right now, is what do we need to do to recover the human element and to want to equip our children to wonder and to want to learn. Google cannot always answer every single question they have, nor should it. They should want to wonder on their own. So that's kind of a long-winded spiel, but as we have gone through this transition at Our Lady of Lourdes, and as we have really implemented this and put the focus into forming teachers well and to hiring teachers who are intellectually motivated, not to just know the third grade curriculum, but to really want to learn more about life. As we've done all of these things, the biggest fruit I have seen, obviously our enrollment it's gone from 90 to we're at 300 plus right now. We just opened our second campus. And the reason we opened our second campus is because we had siblings filling up every open spot that we had. So we're having these large families come out of the woodwork and want to come to this school because they see finally here is a Catholic school that is committed to excellence, to the marriage of faith and reason, and to doing it unabashedly different than the public school counterparts. So the first fruit is, yes, we grew our enrollment. That was great. It's good job security for me. I would say the bigger fruit of what we have, and this I never saw in my 7 years of teaching prior to taking over, is joyful students who want to learn. They love coming to school. They do not dread it. They love going home and talking to their parents and saying, okay, today I learned about, freedom as it relates to John Paul II's encyclical on freedom and as it relates to Uncle Tom's Cabin. And I've had parents call me and say, what are you teaching my kids? I haven't thought those thoughts since college. And those are 8th graders. Like, we have exploded their desire to want to learn and blown the kind of the status quo bar of what kids are capable of doing. They are capable of far more than the standards that have been put in place, unfortunately, by education. So the fruits have been higher enrollment, a love of learning, and then most important to me has been to see the kids love their faith and to want it to be more than just the 35-minute religion class they have. It touches every part of their life. It is the culture of our school. It is the air we breathe. And we're not nerdy. We're not this crazy, like, fringe Catholic school. These kids are on fire with their faith. And, we go to daily mass. We go 4 days a week to mass. And the moment we started doing that, our discipline problems went away. The kids started treating one another as brothers and sisters in Christ in a way that no positive reinforcement chart or, nothing we could have done would have affected that the way the sacraments have. And we have kids who graduate and go on and come back and say, you would have been so proud of me. I stood up I defended the faith against relativism and I knew how to do it. And we're very proud of that because we've given them the gifts to do it. So the fruits are far beyond college and career readiness, although that happens too. I've had we have 3 large Catholic high schools right in our area. All 3 of the admission counselors have called me, and their philosophy of education is far different than ours. They said, whatever you're doing at Our Lady of Lourdes, keep doing, because your graduates are the ones who look us in the eye, who know how to answer questions in complete sentences, who know how to engage in a conversation. And they're prepared in math, they're prepared in English. So it's like the whole package here. And it's so simple. What we are offering is not this silver bullet that's going to change in 5 minutes, when the next program comes along. What we're doing is understanding the purpose of education and forming humanity in that. And so it's been the most amazing ride of my life. And I still continue to learn every day. I actually think the 8th graders are smarter than me as far as what they've been exposed to in their reading. I mean, the way they can talk about the Iliad, I'm like still struggling sounding out the names, and they're far beyond me in that. And it's really great to see. I mean, isn't that what we want? We want to give the next generation something more than what we had. And unfortunately, maybe a lot of you have had this experience. My Catholic school education experience left very little desire for me I don't remember what I learned. I remember I knew how to take a test. I remember I could sleep through history class and pass the tests because I knew how to memorize the bold-faced words. And I was a straight A student. I feel like I got gypped. I did that through high school, and I actually even did it through college. I didn't start really taking education seriously till postgraduate. And that's not good. We need to do better than that, and we can do better than that. I think Lourdes is a great example of this. And like Mike said, this movement is sweeping America. I get calls probably 3 or 4 times a week from Catholic schools across the country saying, how did you do this? What do I need to do it? Coach me through it. And what a beautiful thing to see this happening in every demographic, in every economic, it hits everything there. It's not for a one size, it's not just for rich white kids, which is much of the perception. These are schools in every demographic that are just doing wonderfully. So I'm encouraged by this effort and will happily take questions, and thank you for your time.
Maggie, you're on mute.
Now we all mute. So thank you. That was very inspiring. And maybe I could launch a question, and then people who would like to ask questions, the chat box is actually the most reliable way, but I will also try to scan if you raise your hand and call on you if you'd like to engage directly, but get your questions or comments ready for the chat box. Again, I've been thinking about this question of why, and there's a lot of answers and there's a lot of conversation in the chat box, all of which is very good, of why the technology isn't the answer to education. And I mean, it may go deeper than the addictive nature of screens, which is a real problem, to the idea that when you instrumentalize education and reduce it to a set of external skills that you're supposed to acquire, even the skill of thinking clearly, it's fundamentally boring because it doesn't engage with the human need for an interior life. And that may be another kind of paradox, because what you're describing is students who are extremely well socialized, and they know how to engage, and they know how to be part of and build community, all of which are very valuable skills in an instrumental sense, but more fundamentally sources of human joy and flourishing. And I wonder if you have any reaction to this idea that when you do not cultivate the interior life, what happens is, this mad search for entertainment, because fundamentally you're in a very boring interior world, very flat.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think we call that the sacramental imagination. So we want our kids' imagination to form and to be well formed. That's not just their imagination to play Dungeons and Dragons with swords. It's the way they encounter reality. It's the way they look and imagine things in their brain. And if their imagination has only been formed by a screen, reality is then boring. And no amount of Ritalin or, positive redirection can curb that addiction. The other thing, I just meant to say this earlier, there's a great book that Gavin and I've talked a lot about. It's called The Collapse of Parenting by Dr. Leonard Sachs. And he's a pediatrician, and he talks about how it's actually, it changes the brain. Technology changes the brain. We all know that. It's so detrimental when the brain is still being developed to put a device in front of a child, because it now has changed the way that brain has developed. And we see that across the board. I mean, the incredible rise of ADHD is unbelievable, but also just the aggressive, the inability to have human interaction well. We're suffering from technology. I don't know if that was directed towards Mike or me, but I just jumped in.
No, that's really interesting. I also wondered, Gavin, we're going to bring you in here in a second, but you're in the beginning of a process that Rosemary is now 10 years into, and I'm wondering if you have any comments, questions. We wanted to pull some wisdom out of Rosemary. I think you'd be the person to do it. Is there anything she said that really struck you and that you are really engaged with at the beginning of this process for Stella Mars?
Well, I'm a teacher. And so the thing that strikes me as most important about what she was saying is her own experience as a teacher of feeling that she was giving less than she could to her students in Catholic education, and the desire to give something more. And then at the end of what Rosemary was saying, she was talking about the relationship between the teacher and the student. And so I think that's really the core of it, the relationship between the teacher and the student in the classroom. And I think how do you form your teachers? How do you find teachers and work with teachers who have the interior life and the formation to be able to share that joy of classical Catholic learning with other students.
Well, that seems like a great question for both of them, because that's what Cana Academy strives to help do too. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Rosemary,
I'll start, and I think this might be shocking, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but this is coming from someone with a teaching degree. I very rarely hire anyone who's come out of teachers training, mostly because, and through no fault of their own, they're very well-intentioned people, but they have been trained to see education as a utilitarian, and they mean well, they want to form children, and I certainly am a product of that, but they are not on fire with their content, and they don't have, unfortunately, well, okay, so I don't do that. What I look for in people when I hire them is their passion and zeal in their Catholic faith. That should bleed into, no matter if they're the PE teacher or the gym or the science teacher or whatever, or even a preschool teacher's assistant, or even the janitor. The faith needs to be present. And then the other thing I look for is really a passion and desire to understand their content and to teach it well, developmentally appropriately, and then have the lifelong desire to keep learning. I can't tell you how many teacher trainings I have sat through in my previous teaching career where it felt like we were being talked to as if we had the lowest intellectual ability on the planet. I think teaching is unfortunately a very under-respected thing, and it's because we haven't formed intellectually charged people to teach. We just haven't. And so I can teach classroom management. I can teach them how to write, grades and help them make assessments. Those skills are very teachable. It's harder to find someone who's got all of those skills mastered, but has no passion and desire to give these things. It's very hard to teach that. So I have found that it's easier for me to train, the basic skills of classroom management, how to make good bulletin boards, how to communicate with parents. It's a lot harder to teach someone to be alive with their faith. So,
Michael, did you have some thoughts on how you find good teachers for these schools?
Yeah, everything that Rosemary is saying is resonating with other heads of schools that I've talked to. It's all the heads of schools of the great schools that I respect, all of them, the education degree is a red flag. They generally try to avoid it. I'd say the two things that I would just add to what Rosemary said is, number one, the very first thing I'd look for is someone whose faith is on fire. They have a lot, they're on their road to sainthood. You want to hire the virtuous teacher who can be a model for these kids. And that's the number one thing I'd start with is their faith on fire? Are they in love with Christ? I'd say the second thing is the point that I touched on earlier. Are they themselves full of wonder? Yeah. Are they still learning? Are they, because they have to model that. Yeah. They want to model the faith and they want to model the sense of wonder. So those are probably the two most important things that I would say. Obviously you want to have someone who loves kids, and has a passion for their subject and is on fire for it and wants to get it across to their kids. But I would say faith, strong faith and full of wonder are the two things that I would add.
We have a question from Christina Sullivan, who says, in early discussions about 2 years ago, there was talk about partnering with homeschool families in the Bay Area in a sort of hybrid program. Will this be considered when Stella Maris opens or within a few years of its opening? Gavin, what about a hybrid program for homeschoolers?
Well, it's something we're certainly looking at. There's a school, another classical school near Rosemary in Denver, a Protestant classical school that has a program where they add to their traditional program. They have 3 and 4 day models. It's something we would certainly consider. Our focus is to begin a parochial school in the Archdiocese of San Francisco. So our focus is on getting kids back into in-person learning as we hopefully and God willing transition out of COVID. So that's our primary focus at the moment is beginning our in-person learning programs. We're focusing especially on kids in K through 2 to get started. And that's really the place where we're starting the program. But it's definitely something that we're looking at. And I think based upon the interest that we receive from families, if we see there's a strong interest in that from this presentation, that we would certainly talk with families and our committee about how to provide that.
Brenna has a question. Does this kind of education work well with children with special needs or learning differences? And does Stella Maris plan to serve these children?
Well, I can answer the second question first. We do, right? All Catholic schools are committed to serving children as much as possible. We have to recognize that there are children who do have needs that we can't meet, and we'd have to look at each child individually. But I think maybe Rosemary would be well able to talk about how that operates in her classical curriculum, because I know we've talked about that. And she's found actually that children who have many academic needs and even medical needs can be well served by a classical curriculum that's not focused strictly on test taking and those sort of things. So Rosemary, I don't know if you would like to address that.
Yes, that's a great question. And yes, so we started a special education program 2 years ago to accommodate, we have 2 students who have Down syndrome that are in the program. They're currently distance learning because of the pandemic, but we began this program to serve them, and God willing, they'll be back soon. I have a couple thoughts. The most basic thought is this kind of education serves special needs kids and kids who are have learning differences so well, because it focuses on the human element of learning. And what I mean by that is it's a very experiential encounter. We're not sitting in our desk all day reading textbooks and, the teacher asks a question, I answer back. The kids, no matter if they're in preschool, 3rd grade, 8th grade, are oftentimes out of their desks. They are learning not just auditory and not just written. They are building things. They are taking walks, observing in nature. They're acting out poetry in a way that brings to life Paul Revere's Ride. And so it fits the needs of every kind of learner, whether they're kinesthetic or auditory or what have you. But also we have several students who have, they're on the autism spectrum, or they have, and I didn't mean to be flippant about my comment about ADHD. I know that it's real. I think screens make it so kids are distracted more easily, but we do have several kids who have learning needs that are different, and they actually thrive in this environment because the pressure is they're not being asked to sit in a box. They're experiencing their education in a way that really resonates with humanity, not just a certain few who can sit still all day in desks. So that's the first thought. The second thing is there's a great book to read. I love to tell you that there's people smarter than me that have had these thoughts. It's called Simply Classical by Cheryl Swoop. I'll put it in the chat in just a second. And she has 2 severe learning disabled students, and she discovered classical education. And the public schools had said, her children will never be functional adults, and, you can kind of kiss education goodbye. And she has now, I think they're in their 20s by now. She actually came out and led a professional development for us. One of them works at a grocery store. They love to write poetry. They have beautiful penmanship. They're able to read. So all of these things that were immediate no's in their life because of their severe learning disabilities, she was able to unlock through classical education, through offering this more human experience. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but yes, very possible, and actually one of the best ways to educate, I believe.
Well, thank you, Rosemary. Oh, I'm sorry, did someone want to, Brenna, did you want to say something? No. Okay. Maybe, Gavin, this would be a good time for you to share your specific, more detailed vision for Stella Maris Academy.
Yeah, I will be very happy to do that. I just want to add to Rosemary's comment that, one of the things that's key about our program and many classical programs is small classes working closely with students in which the relationship of the teacher and student is important. As an elementary educator and principal, my experience has been that many students struggle when they have academic difficulties with things like test taking, struggle with executive function, struggle with the kinds of skills that are often exacerbated in a large classroom where the focus is test taking rather than inquiry. So I think that the classical model is naturally well suited to student learning in a way that often addresses those difficulties. We could say more about that. So I know because of time, let me just jump into share my screen and jump into what I was going to share with people this evening. So let me just say that I really probably should give this presentation by just saying to Rosemary and Michael's presentations, ditto, and then be silent. Batting cleanup is often very difficult. I have the distinction of having had Barry Bonds be on my middle school baseball team, and his job was to hit the ball out of the park and my job was to strike out. So I'll try to do a better job with what I'm about to say here. And let me just hope that my slides will, oh, that's interesting. Oh, there we go. Okay, very good. For some reason, my slides were not advancing. So I'm here to share with you something very beautiful that's happening in San Francisco at Star of the Sea Parish. This is a very special, vibrant place with an engaged parish life, with a joyful, faith-filled, hopeful pastor, Father Joseph Ilo, who's brought me here to join his team. We've learned many lessons, I think, from COVID-19 about education, the value of community and relationships, the central connection between teacher and student that's essential, the idea that education is labor intensive. And some kids are thriving in this present environment, but many are not. So in the middle of all of this uncertainty, the question can rightly be asked, is it the time to start something new? And my answer is absolutely. It is the time to start something new. We are building a hopeful, faith-filled, safe, joyful garden for children, and it's being reborn at Star of the Sea Parish in San Francisco. To get into this question, I invite you to consider for a moment a very personal touch here. My dad, by the way, worked for a company called FMC. So if you look closely at the picture, you'll see something there. Imagine a 12-year-old for a moment between his 7th and 8th grade year, entering the early adolescent point in life where there's a search for self-identity. When the world begins to close in, and it often feels like it's getting very small in middle school and closing in on us, this is precisely the time when parents and schools need to expand children's horizons. So I was very fortunate actually in 1978 to find myself on a hot summer day, standing near the finish line at the stadium in Olympia, Greece. Thanks to a remarkable uncle, my brother and I went on a 75-day journey from Turkey to Greece to Italy to France in the footsteps of St. Paul in Ephesus and in Athens. We were in Rome. We were in Michelangelo's Pietrasanta, and we were in the heart of the Latin Quarter in Paris for a period in time. This experience rocked my world. It catapulted me from my Bay Area middle school, very parochial experience into an exciting world of classical culture. And I'm absolutely convinced as an educator that enlarging our students' worlds and giving them exposure to the great 2,000-year intellectual tradition and heritage of our faith and culture is what will make it possible for them the surest path to excel in life. And very practically speaking, this is what we have in mind by an integrated Catholic education at Stella Maris Academy, a joyful, faith-filled exploration of the arts, science, history, literature, mathematics, all grounded in our faith. So let me talk a little bit about our mission. We say that our mission is to form hearts and minds through an integrated classical curriculum. And I just want to unpack those words for a minute. You know, formation is not merely information. It's a deliberate process. The habits that we acquire in elementary school literally shape our whole life. Parents and teachers do have an important influence in shaping kids' habits and expectations. So it's very important that we think that formation is key in what we're giving our kids. What about hearts and minds? Well, education is more than just knowledge or understanding. You can instruct a child in the facts, but what they retain, what they care about, what they hunger, what they sacrifice for, that depends upon heart, right? And it will determine how they excel in life. Classical Catholic education shapes intelligence and the capacity for loving. And this is much deeper than what contemporary culture talks about when it talks about social and emotional learning. What do we mean by integrated? Well, you can't understand a sentence only by understanding its parts separately. Making meaning requires an understanding of the whole, how things fit together and make sense. What is true of a sentence is true of every discipline that we study. Classical education teaches the same subjects, but it differs in its approach. And I have to say, classical is not antiquated or outdated. It means the best, right? There's a prejudice of our time that new is always better, right? We choose the best historical and contemporary sources of knowledge that are going to provide great models for our kids. That's what our mission is. Rosemary mentioned the idea of a partnership with parents, and she talked very eloquently about what this means. Let me just add to that by saying, you know, we believe here at Stella Maris that parents have a sacred duty to provide for their children what is best, but that growth can't occur without struggle, trust, courage, and sacrifice. Education is more like joining a team than it is buying a car. Everyone has to be on the same page about mission. There has to be a critical relationship of trust between parents and teachers and students. And so we seek a community of like-minded families here at Stella Maris who want an authentic, joyful Catholic education for their students. Michael mentioned wonder. So, you know, it's very important for me to talk about what does this mean? What is wonder and why is it important? Well, you know, what I want to say is learning is fun, but it's not just enjoyment or coincidental satisfaction. Curiosity about things is what grips us immediately to what is attractive or immediately pleasing, but curiosity fades the moment that there's challenge or struggle. Curiosity is therefore paradoxically risk averse. Curious kids jump in, but they don't swim to the end of the race. Perseverance is born of struggle, taking risks, making discoveries, asking good questions, risking an intellectual guess, even being willing to fail, right? This is the focus of what wonder is, and this is what we're trying to provide to kids in a classical education at Stella Maris Academy. We offer a rigorous integrated academic program. You know, rigor is not just about the difficulty of a task. It's about the student's ability to synthesize her own understanding, to bring elements of a problem or a question together, to make an original, thoughtful contribution to a subject. Rigorous and integrated go together, right? When we ask students to make connections between the things that they're learning in different subjects, we move beyond test-taking skills. When we teach them to analyze logically and represent their conclusions eloquently, through shared inquiry, we promote understanding that goes beyond mere test performance. That's what true rigor is about, and that's what we are aiming for here with this curriculum. I think Rosemary touched on this beautifully, but I'll mention again, this education is practical, but it's not pragmatic. Pragmatic education as its highest target aims at college, career, and readiness and success. Now, as a former college professor myself, I've known too many students who arrive in college and they don't succeed, precisely because their entire focus has been on getting there, on acquiring academic and career skills. But when confronted with the wide array of possibilities that college has to offer, and even the distractions of college life, they don't know what to do. And they're not well prepared for facing uncertainty about their future. in classical education, Catholic education, we aim for higher targets because students succeed when they have a vision of their purpose in life. So I would say aim for heaven seriously, and the other things will fall into place. That's the goal at Stella Maris Academy. A little bit about the nuts and bolts of the curriculum. You'll hear these words used: grammar stage, logic stage, rhetoric stage. People ask about them. Historically, these are the terms that have been used to describe classical education, but they shouldn't be interpreted rigidly. They should be thought of flexibly. You know, students begin in the grammar stage of life, in which they love learning and words and growing in their imagination and exploring their world and learning to communicate. They also need to learn to read in order to read to learn, and that's a key part of that early stage. And then somewhere about grade 3, they progress to the logic stage, in which they become fascinated with asking critical questions, taking things apart, figuring out how they work, building things. And ultimately, as they enter their middle school years and beyond, they have a growing awareness of themselves as persons who can shape their world and be deeply impacted by language. And the classical curriculum pays special attention to this natural development of the human person. It's important to say that classical languages, which are a key part of our curriculum, are not dead languages. They are the root and the key to many languages and cultures. The rigorous logical structure of a language like Latin forces the mind to think clearly in analysis. And also, study of classical languages and cultures develops a habit of mind that prepares students to be ready to encounter other peoples and cultures with empathy and understanding. So classical language is a key part of what we're doing. A few other things to mention: the centrality of music to our curriculum. We know that beauty is a central pathway to the appreciation of truth and goodness. Maggie talked about that at the beginning. Rhythm prepares the body and the emotions to support cognitive growth. So music has a central place. Theology is an integrating principle, right? Theology helps us to make sense of the whole and a purpose in life. And our faith animates the love of learning and the joy in what we're doing, and helps us to guide us to make good, intelligent choices. We say that our students enter into great conversations. Integrated classical education encourages students to dialogue with the greatest contemporary and historical minds, but also to learn the art of respectful conversation with each other, to be able to represent their ideas, to be able to make the case for something, but to be able to really listen to other people and understand and appreciate what they're saying. This is a key skill in our democracy that it develops. And finally, we talk about the importance of resilience. I like to use a Disney word here: stick-to-itivity, right? Contemporary educators often speak of emotional intelligence. We use the word character formation. It's a key piece of what our Catholic classical educational program is about, and it's how students are formed well to succeed and excel in life. So one capturing thought, if you remember nothing else about what I've said, the relationship between the student and the educator is central. This is really simple in a certain way, right? It's the relationship between the teacher and the student in the classroom that makes the difference in a child's life, and the adults that stand around and support that relationship: administrators, other teachers, support people, faculty. What made the extraordinary difference for me as a young child was a teacher, right? And what will inspire joy and make a difference for your child and the joy of learning in life is someone who possesses that joy internally, as Maggie said, an interior life, and someone who can communicate it effectively to kids. Classical integrated Catholic education is about forming that relationship with your child to enable success and deep, lasting happiness in life. So that's really just a quick overview of what our program is about.
So we have some questions, Gavin. Well, maybe we can get rid of the shared screen so we can be back in.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, but interesting question from Sean, Christina's husband. I have a background in construction. Do you have plans for such hands-on work in your curriculum?
Well, I think construction is very important. My dad's an industrial engineer, and I would say that although I've never taken a a formal course in construction or electrical work or any of those sort of things. I've crawled under the house, I've pulled Cat5 cable, I've pulled Romex, I've done other things. And I think kids want to build things. And part of the problem with screens is that everything is virtual. The experience of young people is virtual. So if we had more time to talk about it, I would talk about how especially the science program in the middle school grades focuses on engineering challenges. It kind of skips a generation. In my family, my dad's an engineer, my kids are engineers. I'm the philosopher in the group, right? So yes, I would say absolutely. The idea of a design mindset, the idea of being able to produce things and create things, as well as to understand and analyze them, it's a key part of what education is all about, especially in the sciences and mathematics. And so a buzzword there is hands-on. Definitely, I think hands-on is important. But Rosemary also talked about going out and asking questions in nature, seeing things, observing things, being careful observers of nature. So I think that's another key component of it.
Shelley asks a very great question. Are you interested in retired people who have a passion for learning and for the faith as possible teachers at your school? And she didn't ask that, but if so, how would someone get in touch with you if they might be interested in becoming a teacher at Stella Maris Academy?
Well, you can certainly write to me by email. I'll give my email address in the chat. I'll put that in a minute. But if you go to stellamarisSF.org, our website, there's a contact box there, and that would get to me. So anyone who is interested in this school as a parent or a prospective teacher, you can reach out to us through our website, or you can call us at Star of the Sea Parish in San Francisco. And I would say simply, yes, I think Michael's point was a very good one. We're looking for people who are on fire about the faith, who are on fire about Catholic education. Obviously, you have to have a deep skill and understanding in working with young people in the classroom. The key thing about education is some people are made to be intellectuals, but not teachers. And some people are made to be teachers, but don't have the content knowledge to provide this kind of education. We seek people who have both that joy of working with young kids in the class, but also their understanding and fire for their faith in Catholic education. So, yep, we're going to be recruiting staff, and we're going to be building our classes out over the next couple of months. And so please do get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you.
Are there other roles? Parents obviously will want to get in touch with you. And why don't you just say your email right now, and then they can go look at it in the chat box too.
Okay, it's first initial, last name. So Gavin Colvert, and everybody has to hear C-O-L-V as in Victor, E-R-T as in Tony. So G Colvert at stellamarisSF.org. So there's a Stella Maris in La Jolla. They've been around for a little while. So we're Stella Maris, but SF, all one word, .org.
Excellent. And are you looking for any other kind of volunteers? People who are good at development or marketing, or maybe want to just volunteer in the schools, teach special classes. Is that something you're equipped
Yes,
to?
absolutely. We're looking for people who have skills in sacred music. We're looking for people who have skills in the arts. We have many talented parents and families who are part of our parish community who we will tap, but we're definitely looking for people who would bring something unique and special to the table. And we're in that phase. So if you want to be a part of this journey, if you want to be a part of this endeavor as a parent or as a supporter or as a benefactor in any way, please reach out to me, and I'll be very happy to talk with you and share with you the excitement about our developing school program.
Do you know what the tuition levels will be, and will scholarships be available?
Yes, so tuition will be comparable to that of other Catholic schools in the city. It'll be between about $9,000 and $10,000. We're going to offer a serious discount for multi-child families. So there'll be one discount for 2 children, another discount for 3, etc. We're very blessed. Star of the Sea Parish has been operating an elementary school since 1909. And so as we reopen that elementary school, as a classical integrated academy. Father is blessed with a scholarship fund that's been a part of the school community for many years, and also benefactors who are supporting the parish. And Father is the most all-in pastor I've ever met. He's 100% on board, and he said to me, we had a conversation about this. He said, Gavin, he said, if a Catholic family, if a family wants a Catholic education for their child and understands and appreciates and wants to be a part of this endeavor and our mission, then we want to make it possible for them to come and attend this school. Financial obligation should not be an obstacle insofar as it is humanly and spiritually possible to make it happen. So if you want your child to be a part of this, please reach out to us. Our tuition will be comparable to other Catholic schools, but we have resources that make it possible to help families who need that assistance to be a part of our school community.
I want to respect the time. We're about 3 minutes over, and so I would like to officially close the